Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lisa Simmons, and I'm the Program Manager for the New Festivals Grant Program. Can everybody hear us okay? You can just type into the chat and let us know that you are hearing us. Excellent. Well, thank you all for tuning in today. The webinar is going to be about an hour, and we'll be talking today about collecting data on your festival. We're doing this in order to help you understand who's coming to your festival and also for you to build a relationship with your audiences. John Beck, who's the Deputy Director at Arts Boston, and Ryan Heafy, who is with us, will be joining us from North Carolina. He's the Engagement Officer with a company called Think Ideally. And they will be leading the webinar this afternoon. Now, because we have such a large group on this webinar, I'm going to ask you to use the chat box in the lower left side of the screen for any questions that you may have, and then we can address them at the end of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Mass Cultural Council website probably in the next day or so. So I'd like to get started. John?
Thanks, Lisa. I'm John Beck, the Deputy Director of Arts Boston. I'm thrilled to be here. Arts Boston is thrilled to be partnering with MCC on this festival's program. We are providing marketing promotion as well as technical assistance for social media. Some of you may have been on my colleague Jen's webinar last week, as well as data collection and analysis for funded festivals. In this webinar today, we'll discuss the how and why of data collection, so how to collect it, why you should, and what you can do with it once you collect it. And as Lisa said, I'll be joined by Ryan Heafy, who's a social entrepreneur and founder of the Imagine Upstate Festival in Greenville, South Carolina. Who will share best practices for data collection he's found through his festival work. Just briefly about Arts Boston, we're a nonprofit art service organization. We've been around since 1975, and our mission is to support and grow the arts in Greater Boston. We do that through audience development work, capacity building and research, and specifically over the past few years, we've worked with organizations to help them use data to better understand audiences and build relationships. But the question we hear most from groups is, who are these people? Who are our audiences? What do they look like? Where do they come from? How do they behave? Who's missing? And how can we get more of them? Arts Boston can help you use data to answer these questions, and we have some tools for helping you to do that through this festival program you'll actually be able to utilize. But first, I think it's important to sort of talk about our philosophy around audience development. We believe that audiences are people. I know it's radical, right? It may sound obvious, but audiences are people. They're not tickets, they're not seats, it's not revenue, it's not total attendance, it's people. And they each have their own motivations for why they attend. So when we talk about audience development, what we're really talking about is building relationships with people. And that's important. So I like to kind of think about audience development and relationship building like dating. So say you meet someone at a party and you hit it off. You're having a great time, having a great conversation. The party ends, they leave, and you wave goodbye and you go back to talking to your friends. A little while later you realize, hey, I'd really love to see that person again, but you didn't ask for their phone number or their email address. Come to think of it, you were so busy you didn't even ask for their name, so you can't stalk them on social media. You have no way of contacting these people. That's the end of that relationship. But that shouldn't have been the end. That should have been the beginning of that relationship. Now think about your relationship with festival attendees. Does your relationship end there, or does it continue? What should be happening is the next day you should be contacting that person, asking them to go out again, go out a few times, start to learn about that person, their likes, their dislikes, build some trust. That's all data. Getting to know a person, that's all data. Building trust till eventually you have a committed relationship. With marriage, maybe, if that's what you're looking for. So at Arts Boston, you need data in order to move people along all these steps. So at Arts Boston, we're not data geeks. We're not just sitting around because we love Excel spreadsheets. Trust me, I do not. We're audience development geeks. We just happen to love what data can do to help us build those relationships. Just one other quick thing about that first moment where you meet. Say you do ask for their information right off the bat. You do the right thing. You get some contact information. It's very important that you follow up in the appropriate manner. So say you hit it off at the party. What's a surefire way to never see that person again? Call them up the next day and say, marry me. I love you so much. Please don't ever leave me. Oh, and by the way, can I have some money? Right? They'd be like, get away from me, creep show. But unfortunately, in the arts, we do that all the time. We ask someone for their contact information, and the next thing we do is follow up asking for a donation instead of building a real relationship with them first, based on trust. That's where Arts Boston's tool, the Arts Boston Audience Initiative, can come into play. We launched this tool about 4 years ago to use data to help understand audiences, to build a relationship with those existing audiences, and to help you find more audiences. So just very briefly, what this tool is we take single ticket buyers, subscribers, donors, any participation that has been tracked with your organization, and we put it all into one giant database. And what we're left with, we clean it up, send it through the National Change of Address, and what we're left with is a clean database of everyone who went to arts and cultural events. We currently have 56 organizations participating in this database, and we have 1.5 million households, unique households, of arts attendees. So, but in order for this to work, you need to have name and physical mailing address. So you can imagine having all this data in one place can tell us a lot about an arts attendee's behavior. We overlay demographic information that we get from a large consumer database, so we can learn things like age, race, ethnicity, household income, presence of children. So many things that you never would have thought that you could know about people, we can actually find out. It's an incredibly powerful tool that's been successful for organizations here in Boston for the past few years, and it generally costs about $600 for groups to participate. But through this program with MCC, you'll be able to get access to some of these reports for free. But again, you need name and physical mailing address to do this. So let me show you just a couple of things that you can learn about your audiences. And these are things that we've learned about audiences in general, that 1.5 million. So income. On the top, you can see arts consumers. On the bottom, we're comparing it to Greater Boston. You can imagine on top of that, you could overlay your information about income. Imagine what you could do to go to your sponsors and tell them the income breakdown of your audience, or to report to funders. Age. This can help you understand where to target your engagement efforts or partnerships. Race and ethnicity. You could use this to talk about how you're serving a population that maybe isn't being served by a traditional arts organization. Or you could use it to talk about diversification efforts and actually track that work over time. You can run this demographic report on any slice of your audience at any time if you're in this database. So hopefully you've seen that data can be incredibly powerful. You can learn an amazing amount about your audiences by having name and physical mailing address. But how do you collect that data? This is where I turn things over to my colleague in South Carolina, Ryan Heafy, who's going to help you with that.
Ryan?
Do I need to unmute him?
He's just here.
Hey, Ryan. Are you there? Okay. He seems to be missing. Give us just a minute while we try to get Ryan back on the line. Hold on one second.
Can you click on him? Is that your phone? Is that mine? Oh, it's mine. Can you just right-click on him?
Yeah. Ryan, we're trying to figure out how to unmute you. Do you happen to have your phone on mute or something? Because we can't hear you.
Yeah, do that.
The conference has been unmuted.
Hey, John, can you hear me now?
Ryan, yeah, we're gonna mute everyone again, and then can you hit *7?
*7, yeah.
The conference has been muted.
That's weird. We were.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, all right. Sorry about that, Ryan.
Can everybody hear Ryan? If you can hear him, please let us know. Yep, great, excellent. All right, it's all yours. Take it over.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone in Boston. It is 85 and sunny in South Carolina, so I hope you guys are having just as nice weather up there. Today we're going to talk a little bit about audience data collection and kind of some of the experiences that I've had down here and some of the things that I work with different festival groups in our area to do. I'd like to think, using John's example, that when I go out to the bar at night, I'm more successful in picking up names and phone numbers, so hopefully some of my lessons will transfer over in this presentation. If not, you guys can tell me to stop talking to people at the bar. I'll also try not to use the word y'all. I am from Cheshire, Connecticut, actually, originally. I've been down in Greenville, South Carolina for 4 years, and I am picking up the southern drawl, but we're trying to stay away from that as much as possible. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree at Sikorsky Aircraft, been all over New England, came down here to run a small aerospace manufacturing business, got passionate about workforce development, and we created a huge STEAM festival in South Carolina focused on workforce development and bringing our organizations out here. I also sit on several different boards here and participate in determining how our funding entities, specifically corporations and our big private donors, give money. We talk about how they're going about doing that and how we're revising processes to focus on collective impact. So I'm extremely engaged in our nonprofit community. I'm also running business accelerators in the Southeast and connecting new startups with venture capitalist dollars. So kind of all over the place, but my focus and passion really is workforce development and STEAM education. Talk a little bit for a minute about the festival that I created here. When I left my aerospace manufacturing company 2 years ago, went out and launched Imagine Upstate Festival. We were focused on STEAM. We just held our second one this April, about the beginning of this month, run by Clemson University, focused on workforce development. We raised about $500,000 from private industry about a year or 9 months before our first festival. Very quickly, the event came together. We marketed our event for about 45 to 60 days, and we had 21,000 participants in the first year at this STEAM festival. So we had a hugely successful event. We were able to provide a lot of data back to our customers being the community and our funding agencies, who we basically sold them the festival. We were selling air in the first year. So we were very happy with that. One of the things that we're going to talk about today are some of the things that we tried in that festival and that we've tried again since then. But before we do that, I want to talk quickly about the power of collecting audience data. As John mentioned, name, email, and phone number are pretty easy to get. The mailing address is kind of the bigger piece that gives us some bigger demographic data. We're going to talk about how we can get to that process and some of the reasons why that's a challenge. The first thing is trust. The creepy guy that walks up to you in the bar, or girl, probably not going to go out and give them your phone number or name right off the bat. Same thing's true in a festival. If I go up and ask someone for their information, they feel like they're being approached for their social security number, and sometimes they just don't want to give it. So how do we break down that barrier and make it a more mutual process that they feel comfortable exchanging that information with you? Also, it's usually very inconvenient. Anyone who's used a lot of the different platforms to get people's information know that it takes a while. You don't want someone sitting at a booth filling out a form for 10 minutes, or there's too many things that you have to click through. So how do we kind of get around that process? And also resources. A lot of your festivals, I'm assuming, are out in public spaces. If we're trying to use technology to capture that data, I do not believe Boston has yet a free open access Wi-Fi that anyone can hop on for nothing at this point in time, or does it have free iPads for everyone to use? So we'll talk about that as well. And then from once the point we get this information, we talk about the importance of it. John touched on it a little bit, but being able to go and understand who our demographics are. So we may be marketing to one audience, but what are we actually getting in our festivals? A lot of times our funders want to know who's involved when they're making their fundraising decisions. Are we hitting the appropriate numbers for diversity? Are we hitting the, is there a male-focused audience? Is it a female-focused audience? Are they 65 and older or 21 and under? We want to validate that what we're doing is effective. We want to track metrics on participation, satisfaction. Is this something worth doing again a second year? And then most importantly, we want to be able to target people going forward. Did we really hit our mark? Did we do a good job in getting out the right demographic that we wanted to? Did we not? And for future years, how do we best go about continuing to engage the audience? This is a quick snapshot of some of the results from our festival. One of the things that we did before we started was really think deep about what kind of information we wanted. The information that you're seeing on the screen currently is a summary of information that we gathered during the festival and during that week, whether that was from social media, street teams, interviewing people, or doing surveys during the event, and we'll talk about that as well in a minute. But we had about 250,000 Facebook impressions alone. We cleared 250,000 impressions in social media just during the week of the festival, and it was only marketed for about 45 to 60 days prior. So we were pretty happy about that. We had great satisfaction, and we exceeded diversity inclusion in our festival beyond the actual demographic population of our area, which was a great success for us. So to that end, how do we do this? And there's a lot of different things that we need to think about when we start planning for an event. And really it goes back, in my mind, to the business plan for a nonprofit organization. One thing that I teach a lot down here looking at nonprofits is to really think about them as businesses. A lot of times our nonprofits here, and some of the ones that are failing, are so levered on grant funding alone, and they don't actually think about the value proposition of why they exist and what the ROI is to themselves and the community, that they don't have a plan. So we go back and think about, what are we trying to do? So when we're thinking about data, it's what data do we need and why do we need it? What goal are we trying to satisfy? Are we trying to make sure that we can justify a grant so we can get it again for a second year? Are we going to be applying for a grant, and what information does that grant need? Are we just trying to know how many people attended our event and what demographics they are? So what are we going after and why are we going after it? Then how are we going to obtain that data? A lot of our nonprofits have very limited staff, and that's great. And there's probably a few people on here that are running the show by themselves, and others who have teams of 50 people. Both are awesome. A lot of times we over-lever our internal team to be the ones collecting data or reporting data, overworking our staff. So we're going to talk in a minute about how to kind of get around that and identify who can help us to collect data and how they might go about that, whether it's handwritten forms or collecting on an iPad or an app or other things. So we'll touch on that in a minute. And then, so we have a plan, we know how we're going to get it. That's all great, but if we don't actually put some instructions together and some signage, it's useless. We had a festival I attended very recently here that implemented Snapchat Geo Filters and a mobile app. Nowhere in the entire festival did they share that they had a Snapchat Geo Filter or an app, and no one used it. So they spent a ton of money putting a lot of things together, but they didn't communicate to their audience that they were there. So it's important when we think about collecting data on how we're going to let people know that they can use the different platforms, whether that's just a sign at a booth that says this is where you give us your information, or that it's a QR code to download an app. We need to make sure that things are present. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then goals and metrics. What are you really trying to do for your organization, and also to incentivize the people who are collecting data? If you want everyone to go out and collect 50 names and email addresses, then tell them that's what they're going out for. When we send street teams out in our festivals, a lot of times we tell each student who's there as a volunteer that we want each of them to hit a certain number of names and emails or collect a certain number of surveys, and they'll actually make it competitive. So anything with gamification and volunteers is always awesome. And then we actually give out gift cards to those people who perform the most. And we get those gift cards from our partners who give them to us for free. So the whole thing costs us no money, and we get a ton of data. And last and most importantly, don't forget your hashtag. If you forget it, someone else will create it for you, and sometimes when they create it for you, it's not as funny. So make sure you pick the hashtag for your event, because that, for a lot of people, lets you really aggregate a ton of data on the back end through your social media. We actually use a platform called Radian6, which we can't afford, but we partner with Clemson University, and we pull all of our data based off of the hashtag that we are looking for from social media, and they give us an entire report after all of our events. So many different universities actually have something called the Social Media Listening Center, and if you can partner with those universities, you can leverage your hashtag and their team and power and software to go get that data. Come on. So let's talk about some of the solutions and things that we're doing here. Did mention street teams a minute ago. Many different high schools, especially charter high schools, have requirements for their students to complete volunteer community service hours. We lever that very, very heavily all the time. They are usually more than willing to volunteer their time. It's important to approach volunteer groups at the beginning of a school year or the beginning of whatever cycle that they're on. If you wait until the end, you won't get as many as the other festivals. So make sure you go out and pursue that. A lot of them do look for compensation on festivals that are raising money, but others are more than happy to do it just for hours. How do we use our street teams? Our street teams are usually equipped with iPads donated from Verizon or AT&T. A little known fact is that most Verizon and AT&T hubs have iPads that they lend out to nonprofit organizations to use for things like surveys in festivals. So I would highly recommend that you explore that opportunity. We work with Verizon here, and whenever we want them, there's as many as 40 iPads serialized and available for distribution. They basically wipe them clean, load on our software, and hand them over to us. And we give them back afterwards. So we lever our street teams in that way. And usually we're getting them out in the field. We are in the festivals. We give them iPads with surveys on them asking people for different demographic information. And we also give away incentives. So we give them T-shirts and swag to give away to the crowd. Now, again, we try to never pay for any of that swag. Usually we can get sponsors to brand that stuff for us. Contests and giveaways. Social media contests are huge. If you haven't done them yet, I highly recommend engaging. Be careful you don't get kicked off of Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. If you push your contest too hard, that can happen. I highly recommend looking at the rules for contests and giveaways. There are management platforms that will handle them for you. Or you can go ahead and go for it, but you can actually get your social media shut down by overly pushing contests and giveaways. When you're doing that, again, be sure to lever partners and your vendors. We usually get all sorts of free things. When we did the Imagine Upstate Festival, which was focused on drones and robots and 3D printing, we got drones and robots and 3D printers from 3D Systems and from Toys R Us and from whoever else in the community was a partner of ours, actually went and gave us things to give away. In addition to that, when you're doing giveaways, one of the things that we like to talk about a lot is going to your partners with a discreet ask. A lot of times people are just asking for cash. When you can go to a partner or a sponsor and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do, here's exactly what we need money for, we're usually much more successful in that manner, or they have things to give away as well. A lot of these companies that you work with have swag all the time and are happy to give that away. When you're doing social media contests and giveaways, don't forget to force people to like, share, and tag a friend, like your page, and share the post. That always goes a long way in aggregating data. Demographic data is awesome for mailing addresses, but as many of you know, Facebook now gives you some phenomenal information as well. The next thing on here I think is pretty cool. And if you haven't done this yet, I highly recommend trying it. It works not only in festivals, but in a lot of different conference environments as well. Anyone who's gone to a coffee shop before may get a rewards ticket. It looks kind of like a business card. You stamp it, 7 times, and the 8th time they give you a free coffee. Well, imagine that you're in your festival and there's a card, and by getting it stamped all 8 times, it registers you to win a prize. There's a grand prize of your festival. They have to go around and get it stamped 8 different times. They have to go to 8 different vendors or booths in your festival, so now you're driving traffic around your festival. Make those booths be in different geographic locations, so you move them through the entire festival. And when they turn it in at the end, on the back side, they populate their name, email, phone number, and address, optional, and give that back to you, and that makes them eligible to win. So very simple, costs almost nothing. You order them the same way you order business cards. You get 1,000 for $50, and you're good to go. So I highly recommend that process. It is extremely cheap and simple and can be used just about anywhere. Also on the slide, you can see quickly QR codes. The MD15 is actually lawn signs, which is another really great, cheap way to share your message and add signage without violating city ordinances sometimes. And then we're always up on our Snapchat. We love that down there. Quick side note, many of you have websites. I looked through a lot of different festivals information. Everyone's at a different level and where their websites stand. That's great. Those of you who are not using jot forms currently or some sort of form to collect data, I highly recommend it. This is an example of a T-shirt contest where Imagine Upstate used the jot form to collect data. Here, what they did is they ran a contest, had people submit T-shirt designs, but through this process, they were able to use a simple jot form, which is a widget on a website, to collect demographic data. One thing to talk about here that's kind of important is not everything is free. So what we just looked at were some free opportunities. There's some things that are definitely cost prohibitive, and some things where you just have to make a smart decision. So when it comes to data collection and the user experience in a festival, we always like to think about the ROI. Are you getting a true return on investment? If we spent $5,000 to have a photo booth at our festival, well, what did that actually do for us? So I'm going to talk a little bit about a photo booth model, and the photo booth model is used to collect demographic or user data. I don't know if any of you have ever been to a wedding before or participated in other events where you go into a photo booth and you get to dress up and it's fun, and at the end they have you type in your email address and it sends you the pictures. A great opportunity and a great partnership opportunity is to bring those photo booth opportunities to your festival, where people get all dressed up and they enter their email address, and guess what? You just collected that data point. It's important, though, that you establish a relationship with the vendors that do things like this in advance, that you're going to exchange data. Otherwise, you're just populating the photo booth company's CRM tool. So how do you go and lever that relationship, working with all your partners and their technology and the things that they're collecting to benefit yourself? Frank Underwood from House of Cards came to South Carolina and ran for president. During the GOP debate here, they set up an entire Oval Office in downtown Greenville, and I think there was like 100,000 people that rotated through the Oval Office taking pictures in the president's chair and pumping their email addresses into the House of Cards CRM tool. So it works phenomenally well. If you have a draw and a reason for people to participate in anything like that, you can very quickly collect email addresses, and sometimes that's your first step in getting the rest of the information. So that's kind of like asking for the phone number. The email address is less invasive. Some people will lie, but most people will put in valid email addresses, and you can then start to connect with them via newsletters and other publications that now let you collect more information in time. Another thing that actually is kind of free and is awesome are offline mobile surveys. In most events right now, there really are not, we don't have access to Wi-Fi a lot of times, or you're in a confined area where the Wi-Fi signal is not strong enough or are good enough to connect, or there's just too many devices or too many people, what we've started doing here regularly is going to offline mobile surveys where you don't actually need Wi-Fi. You download the app into your iPad. It collects the data within that app on the iPad, and then when you connect back to Wi-Fi afterwards is when it downloads all that information. A lot of people don't realize that's a service that's available. SurveyMonkey has their own version of it now, and there are several others as well. If you're going to be doing surveys, this is where we lever our street teams. Be quick, offer incentives, and ask simple questions. If you have to stand next to me asking me questions in the survey and it takes me more than about 30 seconds to 50 seconds, I'm going to get tired and want to walk away. So make me stay there with an incentive. Have your team understand what they're asking. Be quick about asking. Don't be rude and invasive. Get in and get out and move on. And a lot of the times they're just getting the email address. Name and email address is the best way to go. And give people always the option to provide you their mailing address, but don't force it on people. You can always collect that again at a later time. Another great opportunity is building in mobile apps. I don't know if any of you have had great experience with this yet or not. I've seen people spend anywhere from $2,500 to $40,000 to build out mobile apps for their events. And while that's great, there's a lot of other opportunities out there. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term white labeled, basically means someone else built the technology and then you just put your logo and branding on their technology. So in all of the work that we did, we worked very closely with some technology companies down here. We went through a huge due diligence process and vetted about 20 different event apps, white labeled event apps. Double Dutch is the one that was selected to be used for our festival. What Double Dutch allows us to do was basically integrate live with all of our social media. We added games and contests throughout it. We were giving away stuff every hour on the hour by people posting and taking pictures within the app. The app automatically pushed to their social media. We were able to put up an agenda of all the different shows and events happening. Again, our event was STEAM-focused. We even had a fashion show on a huge stage to really show off fashion during our event, and we had a big art contest, and we had art bikes, which was really impressive too, because I've never seen an art bike in my life. But that was all built into our agenda. We were able to see all the attendees. The important thing about an app, especially with the integration in social media, we were able to connect and pull everyone's social demographics. For those of you who use CRM tools that integrate with social media, it works the same way. So once someone signs up with their email address and allows us to access their Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter profile, it starts to pull all that demographic information immediately, and we can get that report out on the back end. The app also let us do push notifications, set up leaderboards to see who was winning. There was QR code scanners so that we literally hung information about how to download the app and get on board with the QR code at every single event booth in the entire festival, and every vendor in the festival pushed the sign-up. We had thousands of people on the app, which was really incredible in the first year. And that lets them use it again year over year, too, by going with the white-labeled opportunity. The one thing I will caution about apps is make sure you understand the fee structure. In mobile apps, sometimes you pay a flat fee, and other times you pay by transaction. Transaction basically means every time someone posts something, every time someone likes something, every time someone completes a task, although it's great that they're interfacing with your platform, it can become extremely expensive. It's kind of a way for the white-labeled apps to hide the cost, and then you get hit with a large bill at the end. So make sure you pay attention. Double Dutch does not do that. If you're really progressive, RFID and NFC technology and iBeacons are great. RFID basically is used primarily for people tracking. The Georgia Aquarium example here, basically it tracks people movement through the aquarium. So every time they pass through a doorway, it's recognizing where people are during the event. It would tell a vendor or a sponsor, for example, say Coca-Cola had a big stage set up, it would say, hey, we had 1,000 people standing in front of this for an average of 8 minutes all day long. We actually leveraged that technology in our festival. We were able to integrate RFID and iBeacon technology. iBeacon is more like push notification, so if you're within proximity of a beacon, I could send you a message. Basically what that stuff let us do is say, hey, in one end of our festival there was way too many people, and on the other end there was no people, so we could actually tell people to go to the other end of the festival and alleviate some of the crowd control issues. One last thing on that technology front that's pretty awesome. This is cost effective, and if you're not doing it yet, I highly recommend it. This is a phenomenal way to get the word out about your brand and drive user acquisition, especially followers in Snapchat. Snapchat Geo Filters are huge. Geo Filters are also coming to Facebook and Instagram. We're about to have Facebook roll out video reactions, which is going to be interesting, kind of like the smiley faces you see on Facebook right now. You'll be able to actually give a video response to a post on Facebook. Same thing here with Snapchat. People like to give video responses of their day and everything that they're doing. GeoFilter basically says, I'm going to pay $5 for 20,000 square feet for 1 hour to have my filter put on there. So all you need is a PNG image that's going to get loaded into Snapchat, and for $5, your festival can have coverage with that filter for 1 hour. So we had an event, a 100,000 square foot event, the most recent Imagine Upstate Festival. We spent about $60 on the entire festival for 8 hours. So it's extremely cost effective. I highly recommend exploring it. If you have someone that can create any sort of logo to overlay, it's a phenomenal way to spread the message very quickly. There's a bunch of other things that we overlook a lot of the time, from hashtags to click-throughs on your social media. I highly recommend looking at, I have a platform called Greenville Today. If you want to look at that Facebook page, it shows how to integrate your signups for the newsletter. It shows how to put in widgets for Twitter and Instagram feeds right onto the Facebook page. There's all sorts of different things that we can do. But of everything that we just talked about, the most important thing is to know who your audience is, to follow up, and to be relevant. It's great to collect people's information, and they're generously giving it to you, but people do expect feedback. We live in a society now where people like to feel important. So if they're engaging us and giving us information, make sure that you follow up with them and share information that they want to hear. So that's extremely important. To that end, I know I just ran through a lot of stuff in a very short period of time, but kind of to recap quickly, if we're going to go out and collect data, have a game plan. What are you collecting and why are you collecting it? Have a process. Who and how is going to collect it? Instructions and signage. Make sure your team and the people participating in your event know how to use whatever you're giving them, whether that's an app or a form or whatever. They know how to either collect the data or provide the data. Have goals and metrics. Incentivize your team and know what you're going for. Don't miss the simple stuff like the hashtags. Cost-benefit analysis. Put your business hat on when you go out here to do these things. If you're going to go spend $5,000 for something and it's not going to have a return, either on user engagement or on collecting data, don't do it. It doesn't necessarily make sense. Know your audience, follow up with them, and always be relevant. Just to kind of recap again, and John, you can hop in here in a second, but make sure that you guys are committed to doing this. Focus on the data that's going to be most beneficial for your organization. Provide incentives. And really, above all, think about one or two things that you can do within your organization to capture data at your festivals. We just ran through a whole mess of things, but you can pick one, very easily implement it with a team of one, and go out there and capture more data. So hopefully with all that, you guys got something beneficial that you can use. And before we go into questions, I do want to plug one thing. This shot you're looking at right now is actually of our Imagine Upstate Festival, or one end of it anyways, on the bridge that goes over the waterfall in downtown Greenville. On the same location, coming up in May, we have our Artisphere Festival, which has become our greatest thing that we have going for us in South Carolina, or in Greenville, South Carolina, from the arts perspective. And that's foodie, culinary, art, music, and artists. And we have a ton of people from New England that are coming down to participate, the artists participating. And we would love to have some of you guys participate in the next year's event, but also those of you who are coming down for it, I'd like to thank you for that as well, because I know there's several from Boston participating this year. With that, John, I am trying to skim through questions on the side real quick if you want to comment.
We'll do sort of like a little Q&A here, Ryan, with those questions that have come up. We sort of aggregated them here in one place. We just want to thank you. That was really, for both you and John, really informative and really helpful. Somebody asked, and I think you talked a little bit about this when you talked about the sort of cards that you can have made, but one question was, how do you collect data on festival attendance and demographics when you can't rely on ticket sales to get that information?
Yeah, I know that I think maybe some of the things that we talked about might address that. We had a similar struggle with Imagine Upstate as a festival downtown. We actually had 19 different events at different locations throughout the course of our week, similar to I think what the question was getting at. Yes, and it's hard to collect a lot of that stuff in signups. I think it's the people managing your event at each of managing the interaction at each event are key to that process. And each event is kind of its own unique thing. We had more networking type events at the bar. Well, collecting data there is going to be much different than a hands-on art activity with students at a different venue. So I would say it's not necessarily that there's a one-size-fits-all solution that goes across all events. And we really kind of have to custom tailor and think about some of the things that I talked about in here and pick what fits best applicable to each event and have someone be responsible for it. Don't be, maybe your nonprofit organization, but don't be responsible for all of it. Put the onus on the people running each individual event and challenge them to give you information back.
Right, and I think it's an important question because there are a lot of these festivals that are outdoor festivals and a lot of these festivals that are free festivals. I mean, I'm looking at this image that you have up on the screen, and there's just myriads of people, and you want to collect every piece of information from all those people. You don't want to miss out on that. So I think that people are just sort of wondering, and you have different kiosks, and some people might not have that. So it sounds to me like maybe a good way would be to, have these vendors have some sort of sign-up thing, or even, if you have the iPad, to have people doing surveys at certain different stages at different places, so that you'd be using a couple of different ways at different places. Even though the events are free and they're outside, you can get a good percentage. You can't get everybody, obviously, but you should be able to get a good percentage of information from those people that are at your festival.
Yeah, a lot of times we try to do stuff where we have so festivals a lot of times look like this picture we're looking at, right? It's just people come into it from several different directions. You can't necessarily make them all stop at a registration booth. Sometimes you can. Where you can, we try to convert to an email at that booth by checking people in or getting them to sign up at that booth. But really, in this picture, it's not the best example, but we had a lot of people in they're wearing literally bright neon green shirts. They're in teams of two. They are our street team. We literally had 21,000 people participated in the festival. We had 170 people on our street team that rotated throughout times during the course of the day. They went in teams of two. They were typically high school students. They had iPads, which we got from Verizon for free. We loaded a free survey app from SurveyMonkey on the iPad that required zero Wi-Fi. And those people went around and engaged people, and they gave out free T-shirts and cups and random swag stuff, and they collected an abundance of data. And it was gamified between them, so we gave away $100 gift cards to the top 6 teams.
Right.
Now you can give away a $50 gift card to the top team. I mean, but using the surveys that require no Wi-Fi on mobile devices, I mean, you can do it on your phone as well. You don't need to have iPads. Most kids these days are going to have an Android or iPhone that can use the survey in the same exact capacity, where they're taking it on their phone as well.
Right. I'm also wondering too, and John, we've talked about this before, about what's a good number of people that you should be collecting data for. So you have 500 people that come to your festival. What percentage of that should you be trying to collect data from? Because we know you can't collect from everyone. So how do we?
Yeah, I mean, so it depends on what you're collecting the data for. Obviously, if people are always wondering for surveys, like what's scientifically, like what's statistically relevant, and how many do you need to collect? The answer is you want to get as much as you can, obviously, because from our point of view, it's about building the relationship with the person, not necessarily getting a sample that you can then extrapolate. It's actually about capturing as many as possible to build a relationship with that person. So that being said, I would say your goal is to get as much as possible. I don't want to say, hey, if you get 20%, that's enough. So I don't want to give a number. Ryan, what's your thought?
The same, that I would not give a number because you'll never hit the number. To be honest, I mean, it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard to get data, and people are so reluctant sometimes to do it. You can't force people to answer a survey or participate. So, I mean, it's always about how much can we possibly get to give us data points. But I think I'm going to kind of pivot right off of that onto someone else's question about knowing how many people are even there.
Right.
That's a really hard thing to do too, especially if you have multiple events. I will share that we did our data collection process on head count was done with drones. We actually flew drones over our festival every hour on the hour and counted head count. And in our survey, we asked people how long they spent in the festival on average. And we were actually able to get a pretty good assessment on the number of participants that way. It was actually probably one of the best head counts we ever got for a festival in Greenville because people hadn't been using drone technology previously. But honestly, we count manually most festivals here with walkthroughs every hour and getting the best rough estimate that we can. What I will caution people on, so a lot of times people like to inflate the numbers of participants. That's great until it's not reality anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's one particular festival in Greenville, not this one or our Artisphere one, but one of our biggest, and they increase the number every year. And it's completely not true. And everyone knows it's not true, but it's now starting to become embarrassing because they share the number publicly, and it's becoming a more relevant festival nationally. So they're actually trying to tone that back and decrease the population increase every year. So don't shoot yourself in the foot by lying or making up numbers to try to make yourself sound good, because if you do scale over time, it will become embarrassing later.
Well, this is a good follow-up to that question. So somebody is asking, then how do you deal with the issue of double counting? So if you have this large festival and you're counting someone at one end of the festival and then they're also on the other end of the festival, do you count them twice? How do you make sure that you're not overinflating that number by double counting them?
Yeah, we did systematic walkthrough. So depending on the footprint, either one or two people, you would literally have to kind of make defining points and who's responsible for what part of the grid and almost walk it together immediately from one end to the other and try to capture that. But what we did to prevent, the biggest thing on double counting is not double counting at the same time. You might walk down the street that's shown right here, and I might have 4 different people walk down it and count slightly different numbers. But those people stay for different periods of time, and that's what the biggest impact is. So if we walk down it right now at 1 o'clock and we walk down it at 2 o'clock, we might actually have the same exact number of people, but they might be entirely different people or only 50% different people. And that's where in the survey the question about time spent in the festival is most applicable. because we get an average number of people at each time interval, and then we can do a little bit of math to say, well, if we had 100 people on the street, but they were only here for half an hour, and we did it every hour, we had 200 people an hour. And then you can take the number of people per hour times the duration of your festival to get a total number, if that makes sense.
Something else that I've seen people do, Ryan, I don't know if you've ever seen anyone do this, is to track concessions. So if you have one spot where you're selling soda or water or whatever, so you know how many people bought water, and then if there's a natural exit, you have survey takers at the end just ask people, did you buy a water? So you can get a sense of, was it every fifth person said they bought a water? And then you can add up how many people bought water and multiply it to get a sense of kind of how many people were.
Now, what do you guys think would be sort of, as you know, we have a gamut of festivals on this call. What's sort of like the easiest way to sort of collect this? Would you say a raffle, doing something like that? That would be, a sure way in of collecting data on your festival?
So if someone was just to do one thing,
right.
Ryan, what's the easiest, best free thing that these festivals should do?
Sign up and give away. So one thing we didn't actually talk about, probably one of the easiest, is a lot of street festivals have ticket transactions rather than cash transactions. And we actually do here all the time email address as part of the transaction to obtain tickets. And so the ticketing process is really our gatekeeper. Our largest festival in our downtown, you have to give up your email address in order to purchase tickets, and everyone purchases tickets because it's a foodie festival. And that's really been a huge win for us to collect a lot of data, or a lot of names and emails. But, I mean, honestly, the iPads and registration booths are really it's a sure way to get people's information, but people can duck that process. So, I mean, I think a lot of it really truly depends on what the layout of the festival is and how much you play gatekeeper or not. And if you can't play gatekeeper, the street teams is my way to go every
time. Michael just asked a question about what do you do with the data once you have it to build that relationship. And yeah, especially when you're dying to ask them for money to support what you're doing. Ryan, do you want to talk? Do you want to handle that one?
Sure.
I know you have some on how to follow up appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm doing right now with the different brands that we're literally launching right now, we're collecting tons and tons of email addresses and contact information. But what we're trying to do next, once you have that, usually you can get email or you can get social media engagement, meaning them liking a page that you have or following a page. Continuing to communicate what you're doing and to be relevant throughout the course of the year with those people is important. If they don't see the value proposition in their face all the time and understand what they're going to get when they give you money, then why would they give you any money? So it's great to get their information, but if you just go ask them for money and all they went to is one festival and that didn't do it for them, then you're probably not going to win. So usually the festival is used to get them into a platform or into a newsletter so you can continue to communicate with them. Newsletters are obviously a huge way to go. People like using newsletters, but if you harass your people, you'll also get them to unsubscribe from newsletters. So it's really kind of a delicate balance, but engagement across all platforms is important, and engaging with relevant information is really the way to go. And you can kind of test the waters too. I mean, there's not necessarily a clear set time. Certain people you want to engage at different times based off of different funding cycles and what you have going on. So really just share and be relevant and keep them engaged throughout the year. The biggest question our funders ask us is, all right, well, we're going to fund the festival. What are you going to do for the rest of the 11 months of the year?
And from Arts Boston standpoint, one tool that you'll have, so once you've collected name and physical mailing address, you'll be able to send those lists to Arts Boston, and we're actually going to run it through our system, which is the Arts Boston Audience Initiative, and we'll actually be able to spit you out a report that will tell you age, race, ethnicity, household income, presence of children, to give you a better sense of who those attendees are. And so everything that Ryan is talking about, this information should help you be more authentic with that relationship building. The other thing that the Audience Initiative system can do is to help you understand what people are doing outside of your event. So we have 56 organizations participating. Every organization gets a crossover analysis so they can see what % of my subscribers or single ticket buyers attend other organizations. So you can get to know, oh, they also attend these dance organizations. Maybe I should do a cross promotion with those. Hopefully that helps.
Right, I think that's a really important part for the festivals that are on the line and other people that are going to be watching this, is that Arts Boston will be the ones who will be helping you figure that out and figure out who are your audiences, and that's part of our funding, the Mass Cultural Council's funding, and relationship with Arts Boston. So we're really, really excited about that. And as both Ryan and John said, it is hard oftentimes to get street address. So we don't want to say if you only get email or phone number, don't. And we'll talk a little bit more with you about how you're going to share that information with us. But that's also an important piece of data that you'll be collecting.
Yeah. Focus on what you can get and what you're going to use to build that relationship. We want you, to build your relationship first, and then during that process, you can follow up at the appropriate times and have contests and enter to wins to get that name and physical mailing address.
All right.
I think that
one last. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, one last thing to share if people didn't read it on the side. There is a quick summary sheet. It's a basically bulleted brief of what we talked about today that we'll get out to everybody. And then if people have specific questions for me, I'm not going to give you my email address because I can't guarantee I'll reply to it. But via social media at Ryan Heafy, RyanHeea, F as in Frank, Y, which will be on that sheet. Anyone can reach out to me with any specific questions, and I'm happy to set up a way to connect and get back. But I'll help anyone any way that I can.
Excellent. That's great. And as you know, we're here as well. And this we are being recorded. This will be on the Mass Cultural Council website, along with the social media webinar that we did last week, as well as the information that Ryan was just telling you, the summary sheet and all of that information. So any support that you need. And we will be emailing you anyway over the course of the next couple of weeks, and then we're going to be holding another data webinar about what to do with your data. So we're all here to help you out in any way with your festivals going forward. So I just want to thank Ryan and John for giving us an incredible look at data collection for festivals.
Thank you.
And we look forward to working with all of you. And Ryan, we look forward to staying in touch.
Sounds good.
Thank you all very much. Bye.